Hey everybody, my name is Charlie Birns and this is Be With. Today's conversation is with Jac O'Keeffe. Jac is a spiritual teacher and an author whose work pushes the boundary of the conditioned mind, and she encourages her students to engage their unique path with courage, honesty, and integrity. And this conversation reveals Jac's courage, honesty, and integrity because it deals with a very sensitive subject. The subject of what is a spiritual teacher really? And what are the systems or structures a teacher can have in place to make sure his or her own teaching remains in integrity? And in the second half of the conversation, we speak about the deepest level of consciousness that one can experience, seemingly. And over the course of the conversation, a theme emerges, the theme of autonomy, self-sovereignty, and freedom, both for the teacher, for the student, and for consciousness itself. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this conversation with Jac O'Keeffe. So Jac, I'm so glad to be speaking with you. We've been trying for a little while and I'm so glad we made it happen.
Thanks to technology. Good
Thanks
to speak with you, Charlie. Yeah.
So we were just speaking before about this subject that's been on my mind, and I think it's a good entry place for the conversation is what is a spiritual teacher? It's a phrase that perhaps some spiritual teachers are even reluctant to use on themselves. They say, "Oh, I'm just sharing from this place or that place," and then some people will label themselves a spiritual teacher just as a way for people to relate. How do you think of that concept, that phrase?
We all play roles all the time, whether it's friend, lover, child, parent. There are many roles, and the role of spiritual teacher is another one. But it tends to be, kind of politically incorrect to say you're a spiritual teacher, because you'll have the purest non-dual perspective that will say, oh, but there's nothing to teach. And really, that's kind of bullshit, because there's a lot to teach around how to manage your mind, how to find the skills, the tools within yourself, the discernment to recognize what's creating your perception, where are you looking from, how is your reality showing up, how do you deal with that? And you're the one who's creating it in the first place. So there are so many different things we need to learn. Our education system doesn't teach us how to manage our mind and how to recognize what thoughts are. And so, there is a load of stuff to be taught. We can call it something else, but it makes sense that, there are tools to be given. You can't kind of teach someone their true nature, sure, but you can move away what's blocking it, and that's information that needs to be taught, So, I think it's a valid thing to be in the role of a spiritual teacher.
Yeah, one of the most interesting and also precarious things about it is that there aren't necessarily qualifications for becoming a spiritual teacher. You don't go to medical school and become a spiritual teacher. You just, often people have awakenings and then share from that place.
Yeah.
How in your own journey did you come to the point where you were feeling like, okay, I'm now a spiritual teacher?
Something about the traditional languaging that we used to say around religious vocations, or a vocation to become a school teacher. There's something in that I think we should hold on to. And it's similar in that way that the darn thing is going to make you do it, whether you want to do it or not. And I have found those who work in a teaching capacity who didn't want to be teachers are better teachers. Sure, there's a whole skill set around education. Sure, there's a lot of things we can learn about education. It's particularly how adult education works, how to hold a group, how group dynamics works. I did a postgrad on that way back, not knowing at all that it would take me another 20 years to actually put that information into practical use. And while there there are, trainings that we can have for the actual topic itself. No, it's got to come from your own journey. It's got to come from because you walk the path yourself. And so we have teachers who've walked the path themselves and speak from that place. And we have teachers who have done some training that is periphery, but required to have the skills to impart, to actually educate people and hold the space for people or hold trauma for people. So there are these skills that are coming in that we're finding are really, really useful and important. But for being a spiritual teacher itself, it will be the death of it if there is go to school and do your PhD and be a spiritual teacher. It'll be the death of it, because then it'll become an intellectual, cerebral exercise. And that's missing the whole thing. It's about moving away from that capacity and realizing that that's really not just the only thing you are. What is missing, though, that is there in other professions, is some type of ethical behavior professionalism. And because we don't have any qualification, we tend not to have any behavioral practice either. We go to scriptures, which were of their culture, of their time, and not appropriate for now at all. And so something needs to happen around spirituality aligning with contemporary values around gender, around race, around the climate, around how we engage in politics or not, rather than let's move away from all these things, or let's go to scripture and do the traditional thing that's not appropriate at all anymore. Mm-hmm. So we need to find some way of catching up so that teachings and the cultural context can marry better together. And can we do that without an academic body saying this is how to do it? I'm hoping so. So that shift of making it more appropriate for our time, that has to happen. And part of that is, well, what is a professional way that we respect everybody, regardless of where they're coming from and where their background is, regardless of what issues are going on. Like one of, was it Nisargadatta Maharaj, he wrote in one of his, or was transcribed in one of his satsangs. He said that, if you have mental health issues, nah. If you have a mental disability, nah, you can't wake up. You can't wake up if you have a mental disability. It's like, okay, because awakening is for the mind. And mental health was not a thing then. It wasn't acknowledged. There was stigma if there was a mental health issue. And now mental health, we're responsible for our mental health, every single one of us. So thankfully, it's a named aspect of our humanness, our mental health. And where does mental health and awakening, where does that sit? And so, I can hear all the teachers quoting Nisargadatta Maharaj saying, well, no, if there's something going on, if you've got OCD or no, you can't wake up. And it's like, oof, I'm not too sure about that. Can we modernize it? Can we bring contemporary thinking and contemporary understanding of what mental health is into the awakening sphere and see, well, what's involved, and educate ourselves? So that's the kind of thing that I think is really important that spirituality needs to do outside of academia, outside of professional qualifications, for us to take responsibility to make it relevant for this current day context.
Yeah. Okay. That's fantastic. There's a smorgasbord of subjects and topics in what you just said. And I want to get to a lot of them. Perhaps we can just ease in by kind of defining what a spiritual teacher is teaching to a person, or enabling for a person, or showing, or
ultimately removing the blocks that distract one from recognizing truth, or deeper than that capital T truth. To where there was nothing at all, there's that. However, in my own work, I find it really useful to to teach people how to remove the blocks, but also to start saying, yeah, what concept is there now? Okay, we're looking at existential fear. What's deeper than that fear? Deal with that fear. What's deeper than space? Drop through space. Don't be sitting out and hanging out and, oh, this is beautiful, this is spaciousness and everything is all as one. Yeah, come on, go deeper than that. It's too cozy for you. And so I like to direct people, which is a form of teaching also, direct people to a deeper perceiving within themselves. Not a lot of people do that yet, but I feel it's coming. Removing the blocks, and how deep can you go? And what's a glimpse and you can't access it at will? You can't can you access the deepest spiritual experience you've ever had? Can you access that right now? Can you withdraw your attention so that there is no movie playing and you can go right in there now? And not a lot of people can. They go like, no, that spiritual experience was way back. It was when I was on LSD. It was when I was with a teacher. It's like, okay, you're talking from memory now. Let's go there. Let's go there. So I think there's two parts to it. We can teach how to remove the blocks, recognize the mind, recognize the bullshit stories that we get caught up in, but also like the lenses of perception that are deeper than observation, deeper than the I am, deeper than I, where there's no second. The layers, the building blocks of consciousness itself that are in there, like that can be pointed to. We can together navigate going back there. So there's a lot going on in these sessions, of teaching, guiding, orienting. These would be words that would work too.
Now, I'm not going to say this gracefully. There's just no way it's going to come out well. But I'm just putting myself. Well, I can take my own life as an example and say, okay, my life is kind of working, or it's kind of not working. Things are good, work is good, but maybe relationships are suffering, or I have issues with a parent, or there's just a mixed bag. How do I know kind of whether I need spiritual teaching for getting to the core of my being? What brings a person to this endeavor, this enterprise, this search? Or do you think it's just something that's innate in people? I'm just kind of trying to open up the space or the context for people who might not think about spiritual teaching or seeking a spiritual teacher. Why would they find one?
There's something to be said in when you need a teacher, one appears. There's something to be said to that. It kind of works like that when there's an opening within ourselves to something that we can't quite name or grasp, something that we know wasn't created by a concept. It's like, that's kind of deeper than my mind. And when we have that type of an opening, great, until it's like, shoot, I got to find out more about that. I don't know who to talk to about this. My friends think I'm cuckoo. This sounds like I've got mental health issues, but I know that's not what's going on. So when we're not able to navigate in there and make use of it in terms of cultivating a capacity for it to inform our lives, for hanging out there without fear and without avoidance, not using it to avoid life. When it becomes like, shoot, I have these two worlds. How can I navigate? Okay, now you need a teacher. Now you need a teacher if there's the inner and the outer and never the twain shall meet. Are you using one to avoid the other? Okay, don't do that a lot. Go find a teacher. Go find a teacher. So there's certain points on the path where having a teacher would really save a lot of grief. Whereas to sort out your life and to make your life better, that's not a spiritual teacher's job. That's not. That's like, how do I rearrange the furniture? How do I become happier? How do I find relationships? How do I learn about conflict resolution? How do I, that's how to have a better life. Spirituality is about realizing things, not about making things better. It's a recognition. It's always about recognizing something. It's like mega eureka moments of like, oh my God, what was that? Everything just stopped. What the heck was that? All right, that's a spiritual opening, rather than, oh, I'm in the flow and whatever I imagine happens. It's like, yeah, fine, keep doing that until you discover that whatever you imagine isn't enough. No matter how much you do your vision boards and do your, external dreaming and call in abundance and trust everything, it's like, yeah, that's going to go belly up sooner or later. It's going to be not enough. But that's a great fun ride. But it's not spirituality. It's not spirituality. No, it's just, it's just playing with personal power, which is really good thing to do to prepare you for the awakenings, for the recognition of like, whoa, what's this whole other realm? What's going on here? And when those openings come, all right, that's the point. So there's the difference. Is it to make my life better, or is it to give myself some understanding and tools to navigate this inner place that I know is not created by my mind?
And earlier you distinguished between psychology and mental health and spirituality, and I'm sure they are all connected on some level, but
yeah,
we're able to distinguish.
Yeah. Yeah, you can do psychological work forever and not touch spirituality. You can do spirituality work forever, and sooner or later you're going to have to do psychological work. You'll have to. Or you'll be, a teaching asshole. Like that happens too, So which is it, and how do we manage those two values? And do we dismiss one for the other? And each of us has a slightly different cocktail of spirituality and psychology to navigate through in order to like, okay, what's my stuff? And what tool do I use? And what support system do I use? And hey, that's plain old anxiety. Oh, but I'm awake, so I'll just be fine with anxiety. It's like, actually, maybe you need to deal with the anxiety and be with what's showing up in your phenomenal experience. So it gets tricky, because through the centuries, spirituality was like housed in monasteries. Pull away, keep good company and pull away from everything and detach from everything you're attached to. Detach from everything and know that, only your divine nature provides all, and let that perspective provide all. That might and might not work. But it's full of avoidance. So now we have to live and participate in a life. And I'm delighted that spirituality is becoming mainstream, because we can't keep withdrawing and having the spiritual hermit's life. It's dangerous. And so in order to participate in life, we've got to look at what's showing up right now. And there will be psychology, and there will be taking care of our mental health in there too. And being an adult is necessary. Really, we have to grow up. Whereas a lot of the spiritual modeling of the past, wisdom might come, but it was not any use in the world. Because it was like, oh, it doesn't matter. I remember Ramana Maharshi once saying, and like, I have great time for Ramana Maharshi, but here's one area of where, that was of his time and his spiritual conditioning that wasn't seen through. A woman came to him and her husband with their child. The child was 7 or 8 years old, and said, he's really, really ill. We're bringing him to you because the doctors can't do anything. He's really ill. And he said, your child will be fine in 2 days, 3 days. And the child died within that spell of time. And she came back in distraught. Our child died. And she had total faith and trust. And he said, neither your child nor you were ever here. And it's like, that's bullshit. That's bullshit. That's just not appropriate. Sure, from the awakened state, none of this is real. None of this is happening. Sure. But not at the cost of denying what is showing up as the illusion. And the awakening that doesn't allow for both lenses of perception is bullshit. It's bullshit. So yes, there is a part of me that knows this never happened. There's a part of me that knows that Charlie and Jac are absolutely the same essence, but showing up in different costumes. And there's a part of me that totally respects Charlie, who's giving some time to chat with me today, who's running this interview.
Well, what is the responsibility of the awakened state to the illusory state?
Yeah. Good question. I think it's one of respect, which brings us into contemporary values. You know, like dismissing anything that shows up in the present moment is not healthy, because that's avoidance. It's like, well, what is here? And I can see women teachers right now are swinging it over in the other direction. And I don't think, I can see it's a corrective measure, but I don't think it's balanced yet. And a lot of female teachers right now are all about what's showing up right now. And there's so much space for the emotion. It's like, yeah, but be with the emotion and then you know, go out to that viewing point that has space for the emotion, that has space for the phenomenal, that respects all that's showing up in the illusion, and at the same time knows that it's not an illusion. You know, and without the two contradicting each other. That's the place of wisdom, where they don't contradict each other. It's like, I'm not comfortable with the fact that your child died, therefore I can only stand in my awakened state and say your child never existed. It's like, come right in and give the woman a hug. Do you know? It's like, how does your humanness embody the awakened state? And we're only beginning to learn how to do this. We're only starting. So it's a really exciting time for spirituality. And we're going to screw up. We are screwing up. But sure, that's how we learn and grow, you know? It's about that, no? That's what causes us to evolve, is to find out what's not working. That's our growth point, you know?
It seems like we kind of zeroed in on, from my perspective, perhaps the crux of a lot of issues with spiritual teachers, even who from their awakened state justify any behavior, and from the student's perspective justify any of the teacher's behavior because of their awakened state. And it's really interesting to think about how to reconcile these perspectives.
Right. And that model is of its time, where teachings were protected at all cost. And now, no, teachings are freely available. If you have a way to watch YouTube, you can absolutely navigate quite a long way with the computer as your medium for teachers. What happened was, during that time of protecting the teachings, people still needed to deify. Let's make a god of the teacher. The teacher is, you know, always in the abiding awareness. And so their humanness can always be excused, or their humanness is actually always on target to give me something to work on my ego. And that's the greatest cop-out and bullshit and most damaging thing that's been there for all time. And the way that it had been dealt with, when even in those cases of where a teacher is abusing the student, invariably the answer was, yeah, you either go to another teacher, you see that it was, you know, your own ego and the teacher was cleverly teaching you, or the teacher has karma to work out and let karma take care of them. And that's not good enough anymore. It's just not good enough. I want students to demand more. I want students to have their voice. I want teachers, me, to like give the power back to students. Give people the tools and the confidence, the assertiveness, the discernment to be able to like, I think that's bullshit. of a teacher. And sure, a lot of the time it might be projection on behalf of the student, but by goodness, there's a lot of projection that comes from a student onto a teacher when a teacher hasn't pulled their own humanness into their awakened state. And I find it so difficult among my colleagues. The women are much more open to like, yeah, my humanness, you know, my human part is not okay, but I know it's fine. It's like, oh, great. I love to hear that, you know. It's like, okay, there's a recognition that the two lenses of perception are going on here, and I know where the glitch is. I can recognize where the glitch is. All right, and I want to line them up. Super. But the majority of the male teacher colleagues of mine, there's quite a defense around opening up. It's like, if I ask them straight up, how do you self-reflect? Who's there to bounce, to call you out? Who's there, like, if a student brings up something for you to, and glossing right over it. It's like, well, you know, my own sitting in silence. I'm like, yeah, caca, bullshit, you know? Yeah, do you have a psychotherapist? Like, start there. What do you do for your own mental health? Let's start there if you don't like having a psychotherapist. You know, what do you do for your physical health? That answer will come really quickly. But what do you do for your human health, your human psychological health? And it's glossed over, denied, because we still have that mantle of the teacher being exalted in some way. And that needs to die out. Through a transition that involves education, remodeling. It's like if we destroy the old model completely, that's one way to do it. If we try to put new values into the old model, that's another way to do it. I'm not sure how it's going to go. Modeling something different is what I'm personally interested in. Modeling something different. And when I'm talking to my own colleagues, I often say, is that my own bullshit? What do you think of that point of view? And invariably, they think I'm asking them for therapy. You know, and it's like, no, this is pure support. Like, let's come in and out. Can we just weave perspectives, and maybe a perspective that's a little bit stuck in some conditioning with other perspectives? Can we talk about that and not it be, oh, she needs psychological support, not in that box. Do you see? But it's like, oh, if it's in that box, oh dear, okay, so that's the role now. So now I'm in the teacher again. And teachers zap in to that role of teacher and being the one in the higher power role so quickly. And they're not aware of it at all. I'm like, we've just gone from two colleagues having a chat to me being dysfunctional and you being a teacher because we start talking about psychology. And that's where it's at right now. It's like the real issue is, mate, you're not comfortable talking about psychology. When psychology comes up, whoops, you're in the powerful situation. And it's like, So all of these topics about being human are not yet within the realm of, there is the role of me being a human and there is the role of me being a teacher. And how do they intermingle in and respect and have boundaries between each other so that I can be better at who I am, how I show up in the world? How can that be more authentic? How can that be more respectful of my humanness and of the various lenses of perception that create all these layers of duality and unity and deeper?
Do you have a vision for what kind of system a person could put in place if one was a teacher to support his or her psychology?
Yeah, you know, I'm kind of, I kind of see myself as a bit of an experiment for myself. I'm trying different things to find out, and that's always been my spiritual path. So that makes sense to me as a way of learning, you know. Just a little segue, like very early on, when I followed a teacher who was in the body, I went to him once. People had an opportunity to go to his disciple who was giving retreats on his behalf. And you could go to this disciple and ask him for personal time. And I went once and he wouldn't see me. I'm like, Okay, I don't have access for private insight or guidance like other people do. Okay, I could go into rejection, but I'm not. So what's the lesson here? And it's like, all right, figure it out for yourself, girl. Figure it out for yourself. And it taught me to, like, I need to experience everything and not hand over my power at all, actually. I need to surrender to what I am. And if that shows up as a teacher in front of me, I know the teacher is there because my brain needs something external. I know that that's what it is, but it's not the teacher themselves, is God. That's God showing up in form that might be very screwed up, actually. And that's fine too. It's allowed to be screwed up. No problem. And so my pattern always has been to make the mistakes so that I find out what works. And so I enjoy making mistakes. So that's my little preamble to right now. What I think is needed is a peer-to-peer support system where we develop a model of how that could look, where we can literally say, this is the model, this is how it works. That's not academic, that's not borrowed from, a supervisory model for psychotherapists, not borrowed from any place else. Let's listen and have it emerge. How teachers can feel safe talking to peers, feel safe about saying, actually, I don't know if my abiding awakening is still abiding. I don't know. I love to teach, but the rest of the time feels like shit. So maybe it was a glimpse after all, but this is my job now and I can't leave it. That happens. That happens. But there's no place for those teachers to be honest enough about it because there is fear of losing their livelihood. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, this is a psychological process. This is about honesty. This is, but where does a teacher go? Whom do I talk to? Or Madam Maharshi said that too. Whom can I talk to? Whom can I talk to? And we're still there. Whom do I talk to? And I think we can do something about it. So I think we start with peer-to-peer support. A couple of years ago, I was involved in setting up something called the Association for Spiritual Integrity, which is a platform for exploring what we can do. How can we share? How can we meet each other? And every 6 weeks, teachers, people in spiritual leadership roles, even a yoga teacher, anybody, it doesn't have to be like an awakened teacher. But people in spiritual leadership can meet with each other and support each other and learn something new. Because I want to introduce the idea that, hey, when you're teaching, it might be projected on you that you know it all. But let's present a scenario of where you're learning and we bring in an expert in another field so that you get used to being a student again. And that's part of what needs to happen so that the teacher sees themselves as a student too, a student of life, of ongoing growth, so that their humanness, it's safe to speak about their humanness, and if there is anxiety and if there is loneliness and, spiritual teachers, a couple have said to me, oh, but I can't go on a dating app. And I'm like, well, why can't you go on a dating app? Yeah, but I can't. Like, I can't do it. I'm like, but wouldn't it be great if you did? Would it be great if you did? Like, if that's what you want to do, and you can feel that a relationship would be a good step for you, and the contemporary way of meeting somebody is on a dating app, why wouldn't you go there? You see? So it's like there's things that teachers can and can't do, which come from ancient traditions, which are actually harboring the unhealthy aspect of a power play that abuses students.
Yeah, I actually spoke with, I went to a talk that Andrew Cohen, spiritual teacher, gave on Zoom a few months ago, and it was on the guru principle. And I asked a question and I said, well, his response to his own past behavior was something around like, awakening doesn't mean you're perfect. It just means you're awakened. And I said, well, what accounts for the abundance of problems with teachers and students, just because one thing doesn't necessarily correlate to the other. And his idea at that point was just to say it was a cultural issue. It was a mistranslation from, a guru culture from the East coming into the sexual revolution or something of the 60s and 70s. That didn't seem to quite cover it in my mind.
Doesn't.
Yeah, there's something else. And something we haven't talked about also is group dynamics.
Yes.
And I think that's a really important subject when we're talking about projection and deification and all that.
Yes. Yes. I think until, teachers can be honest about themselves as human beings, the women are starting it and they're getting flack for it. It might take a male teacher to model that. Is there a way that self-reflection can happen? I was involved in developing feedback forms that after a spiritual meeting, online or in person, a retreat, whatever, that spiritual teachers would use feedback forms. Very, 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 very few do. And one that I said, okay, you're doing this for a long time. Well done. I've only just started it. And how do you deal with the feedback when it comes back? Well, she said, if a student is unhappy with me, I sit down with them. I said, but so it's not anonymous. Oh no, they have to submit their name. I said, if I had a problem with you as a teacher, I would want to tell you about it and not put my name on it, because the power differential is so strong, so strong. You're still taking the power away from the student by making them say, I had a problem with you. And we're nowhere near students having enough power, nowhere near it. It needs to be anonymous. And then, so the teacher wants to deal with the issue. With the student, no. Teacher, take it away to a peer or take it to a psychotherapist. Take it someplace else. Don't put it back on the student so that we want everybody to be harmonious. Let the student walk away and be disgruntled. Why not? So there's all these other agendas bleeding in. We're not clean about this at all. And, like in Andrew's example, it's like, talking about ourselves, and I saw another interview of Andrew speaking about, his fall from being a teacher and coming back in. I didn't believe a word of it, because he was speaking about it as if it was in the past 10 and I've learned my lessons. And here I am, immaculate again, was the undertone. I'm like, talk about preventative measures, talk about what's in place so that I know I am fallible in my humanness, so that I embrace the opportunity to grow and to learn and to have my blind spots illuminated in whatever means they can. And not that everybody who has a problem with me is right, of course not, but how do we develop the skills and the tools to be able to figure out what is our stuff and what's a projection? That's someplace we're nowhere near looking at that, nowhere near figuring out what that is while you're abiding in the awakened state. Uncharted territory. And then we have like narcissistic personalities who will always be attracted to being spiritual teachers, always. And I spoke with somebody recently who's written extensively on teachers behaving badly and narcissism in spiritual teachers. And he said, look, there will always be 15% of spiritual teachers will be narcissists. It attracts them. So I'm like, my reply was, how do we make provision for that? Like, it must be through education of what narcissism is, so that a student has to have that tool. The student needs to have even more education, around it. And then, of course, the group dynamics. Yeah, the teacher needs to be trained in group dynamics. A teacher needs to have that training, how to hold a group. What is the power play that goes on so that they can manage a space, and they're thrown right in. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
And the amount of students who want to be teachers, it's like, spiritually awakening, and then I see myself as a teacher. It's like, hold on, don't join the two at all. Where this is going is that being awakened while you make babies and be a house parent, you know, while you whatever you do, collect trash and repair TVs and like do normal shit, you know, like do landscape gardening and be awakened. We're moving into that. But right now, there's an assumption that once awake, you'll teach. It's like, decouple them. If you're going to be a teacher, run away from it. Run away from it. And if your destiny grabs you by the scruff of the neck and you are forced to teach, you will get a request after request after request. Even if you say, no, you'll find, shoot, this thing has just taken over. I have no option but to teach. That's a teacher. That's a teacher. You never choose to be a teacher. Like, I'm suspicious if somebody chose to be a teacher, you know?
Mm-hmm. It occurs to me that this conversation, which is not really about awakening, is actually a very profound teaching about awakening and about a willingness to be transparent all the way through.
Yes. Yes, you've beautifully worded it, actually. It's an essential criteria for an embodied awakening. It's essential. That level of, somebody needs to be able to put their hand right through you, you know, because that openness with yourself has to be in there, with all parts of yourself has to be there. And it requires a fair bit of work, you know. Somebody wrote a book, or I don't know if it's a quote, around after awakening the laundry, something like that.
After the ecstasy, the laundry, yeah.
Is that it? After the ecstasy, the laundry. And it's like, yeah, there's laundry before, there's laundry after. Laundry is part of being incarnating. And it's not a bad thing, and it's not something that ever stops. And it's a beautiful exploration, and we have to change our attitude towards it because it's been cast aside, you know?
Mm-hmm. How can we begin to recognize our own condition, right? Something you mentioned was this abiding or non-abiding, or, you know, I don't know if I still have it or I had this experience. Is it with me now? And that seems like a slippery slope, but this is very important. This is integral to this idea of self-awareness and also like checking on oneself. And are there ways to self-regulate in that sense?
That's a toolkit that we have to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what makes us wise. Awakening isn't a one and done deal. It's not. Every moment really is fresh. And where you're looking from right now, like whoever's looking at this, where are you looking from right now? Are you totally in, I like this, I don't like that, that's bullshit. Like, are you totally in your thoughts? Or is there a felt sense of that which is not in the movie right now? Is that also within you? An awareness of some deeper felt sense that's not engaged. It's not hiding. Simply this other awareness, some attention is on that also. Ask the question 24/7, every day that your heart beats. Where am I looking from? I've always found that useful. Where am I looking from? So it's like, am I standing in the Jac story and her brain is telling her what's real and what's going on, and that's the only movie that's playing? Or am I observing? Okay, I can observe the Jac woman who's having the thoughts. And what about going deeper than that, to where there's beingness, to where I am, and I'm not even the observer, to where there's more resting in the and I'm physically moving back my body, I'm noticing, you know, because for me it's behind. And for others it's below, you know. And so in that place of beingness, all right. Now deeper than that, And then words start to get less appropriate, to where there's capital S self and nothing going on, but nothing is absent. And there's a feeling of vast, infinite spaciousness there for most people. And then deeper than that, let spaciousness be gone. Let the characteristics of that zone be gone. And if somebody could walk those steps back, let some part of your attention be at rest there. You can't put your attention there. It's about withdrawing it from your mind. And can you withdraw enough of it, leave it there, and drive a car and have a conversation with a sibling while there is some attention there? Silently, humbly, being human, living an ordinary life with a chunk of your attention resting there. That's the ask. That's the ask of our divine nature.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
And so to be looking from the deepest part that you can access, to be looking from that place and recognize that, oh, going forward, these are lenses of perception, that absolute, the pure beingness, my true nature, spaciousness, vastness, unity consciousness, observer, me, myself, I, the personal out there, it's like these are lenses, lenses of perception that are all slotted in front of each other, narrowing. So if I stay back here, of course, there are tools and skills to be learned to be able to manage all of it, to not contract in when when there's conflict with somebody. Do I leave the wider zone or do I stay back there? Without dismissing it, without judging it, without saying it's irrelevant and not of any significance at all. Can I stay back here and be present to it? That's not easy. And it doesn't come naturally. It doesn't. That's what spiritual practice is. The practice continues. Where are you looking from in any moment? What contracts you? What makes you, whoops, for my survival, I got to leave the wider lenses of perception here. I've got to leave them because my mind says, this is dangerous. It's only dangerous for the me, myself, I. But when our survivor is activated, man, we'll bring in those limitations. We'll bring in those blinkers and we're right in the contracted state again of drama. So there's a fair bit of practice, learning, tools, hacks that are necessary in order to, what happens? What triggers me? What brings me in there? Why would I leave this infinite understanding of what is really real? Why would I leave it? But you will. If you're a survivor, if there's trauma in your system, you will. If there's a habitual conditioned response that you don't see yet is your conditioning, you will. Yep. You'll leave it and you'll go right into that drama.
Well, it makes me think about the range of your teaching, because from what I've been exposed to of your work, you teach about quite a range of phenomena. Maybe that's not the right word, but you help people with kind of daily life problems around money and things like that. But you're also one of the few people speaking about prior to consciousness, prior to non-duality, prior to nothingness without the word nothing.
Yes.
And so there's this extraordinary range of what you're talking about, or these are just concepts. But so it seems like this range. Do you actually navigate between where am I coming from to address different types of subjects? Is that a part of your practice?
Yeah, that's a great question. My own spiritual growth, and here's another myth. Oh, once you're awakened, there's no more spiritual growth. Bullshit. So, there's always a cultivation of wisdom that the state that doesn't change, go deeper than that. So I was teaching the non-duals, kind of traditional non-dual stuff till 2011, I think. I was in bed one morning. My eyes opened. I was like, oh, holy shit, the identification with being the absolute, with being, that which is form and formless, having a divine nature, that's all identity too. Why do I have to have a divine nature? That's who I really am. Crap. Like, all of that was seen to be another layer of concepts. Now, other spiritual teachers have said, oh, no, you just brought your mind there. However, it's 9 years later. No, it's not that my mind went there. There is something deeper than the non-dual teachings. And then I discovered that there are Buddhist teachings who say, yeah, the non-duality is teachings for beginners. I'm like, okay, this makes sense. Invariably, there's my pattern. I go someplace experientially, not have a frigging clue what's going on. Am I barking up the wrong tree here? Am I kidding myself? So it took me some time to get settled within myself. And so consciousness itself is a construct. And that's what non-duality is not comfortable with, because it's all about capital T truth, capital R reality. There's that's the end of it. It's like, no, that's the end of the non-dual teachings. So in my own recognition of prior to consciousness, can I rephrase that? Consciousness itself broke down. Somehow a wider capacity to play in manifestation opened up. A new bandwidth came in, where it was like a freedom from the dual, the non-dual, the dual, the non-dual. It's like, oh shit, like they're in bed with each other, like deeper than both of those. Like, come on, outside the non-dual, but you got to get to the non-dual first. It's really important to have a stabilized awakening. It's really important. Is it the end of the line? No, absolutely not. It's a teaching, a great teaching, but it's not the end of the line. But it likes to tell you it's the end of the line and awakened and period, job done, Another part of why we have bad behavior, because the idea that there's further growth stops. Phenomenal growth, spiritual growth. And so realizations, for me, it's like, how does this show up? And, this phenomenal thing show up? How does this show up? And is there a layer of conditioning around this story? And am I looking from outside of all of it? Looking from outside of all of it, and how clean is that? And that takes a bit of ongoing self-reflection, a love of learning, a love of growth, saying yes. You see, I love getting it wrong. I actually love getting it wrong. And that's something that's innate. Because I needed to love getting it wrong, because I was my own teacher for so long. I knew that I'd get a growth spurt if I could screw up. And I think that would be a good thing for every spiritual seeker to have, is a love for getting it wrong. And that's where transformation happens. So my bandwidth seems to be wide. But it's only wide relative to what's available in our culture right now. 5 years' time, I know my bandwidth of what I'm talking about now will be narrow. It will be. I need it to be. I need there to be somebody who's pushing it ahead of me so that I can grow, so that I can see my blind spots. So that broad, that wide bandwidth, I'm excited about. Why was I always allergic to Facebook? I have no idea. I had to get somebody else to do Facebook. I can't engage on Facebook. I don't know why. I thought it would never take off. And I saw Social Dilemma last week, and I'm like, oh, I thought I'd never understand why I didn't like Facebook. Now I get it. There was just something that I sensed all the time. all the time, that there's just something not clean. Something not clean. I can't do it. I'm like, all right. So very often it takes me like a dozen years to maybe understand something. And I'm patient. I don't mind, even if I never understand. No, it doesn't feel right to me, and I might never know why. I don't look for a reason in order to put it in a neat box. Mm-hmm. I'm fine with not knowing, not understanding, not resolving stuff. It's like, nope, myself and that person, that doesn't need to be harmonious. Nope, that is actually, let it alone. Let it alone. You know, so I trust myself and I review my decisions. You know, the constant self-reflection doesn't mean I doubt my decisions, because every decision I make or every judgment I make or way that I go is right in that moment. That's the best I can do in that moment. And if I know better because of hindsight, great. I'll be more informed for the next moment. But I usually don't look back too much.
Can I ask you, as a mini case study of what you just said, when you have this experience of consciousness breaking down, when I hear that, I think, well, who or what could possibly be aware of that happening? Or what could be, I mean, how could awareness know that that's happening if it's breaking down itself?
That's right.
So what is your process of questioning and something like that?
Yeah. I don't have an answer for that yet. I hope that I will. At the moment, there's a knowing that consciousness is already part of the movie. So the movie starts at it's not pure consciousness and then there's the movie. It's like, no, pure consciousness is actually the first scene of the movie. The credits are rolling on pure consciousness. It's already started. And so we're so used to, well, what's watching that? And that's why we've gotten comfortable with that which has nothing to see, you know, pure consciousness before there's a movie. Pure consciousness, that stable ground where there's nothing happening. Absolutely nothing can happen. All right, so that, here's I think maybe a little bit of a key, is like consciousness can be aware of itself. And you can take, somehow there's some subtle zone, for the want of a better word, of where consciousness is not aware of itself. Keep going in that direction. How can we know the zone of where consciousness is not aware of itself? Now, wherever that knowing comes from, that's it. Whatever that knowing is, I haven't a clue what that knowing is. I don't know what it is, because my frame of reference up till there would always have been awareness, you know, being aware of and being aware of itself, and then awareness that's not aware of itself. How can we know that awareness is not aware of itself, but we can? What knows that? I haven't a clue. I have no words for it. I can't explain it. Like, I don't have any faculty that goes there that can find language for it. But I do know it's the same faculty that then, you know, leads a snowball effect into the breakdown of the building blocks of consciousness itself. That's as good as I got right now on that.
Well, you're pointing to a whole new domain, a whole new context for which there is no language, and even the context actually doesn't even exist. I hear almost nothing of this.
Yeah.
So
you found better words than I have. Thank you, Charlie. Exactly. The context doesn't even exist in both ways. You know, it has no context, and within contemporary spirituality, there's no context either. You know, it is in some advanced Dzogchen teachings, and I know it is in some advanced teachings that are deeper than the non-duality, but you know, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love the scope of this conversation. We've talked about, it's been an interesting journey. I feel like we've covered some, I mean, I think when I reflect briefly on what we've talked about, in a way, it's about offering people the possibility of their own freedom and their own empowerment somehow, students and teachers, because the teachers too are burdened by the projections that they seem to like, so both this later part of the conversation about consciousness and also earlier, there's this theme of offering people the possibility of real freedom.
Yes.
I think unites that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, spiritual autonomy. Because if the students, don't have power, the teachers have too much power. So now it's not working for either of us. It's not. I do think it has to organically evolve, though, not by ideas or a conceptual understanding of where it can go, but from listening to see what's the healthiest way it can unfold. That's kind of the only thing I trust, really, And then on top of that, I'd put my own wisdom, or training, or, from business side to community work side to group stuff to, and asking others regularly, because I'm like, okay, I'm out of my depth here. Who's an expert in this field? The evolution is coming from a deeper place. And I'm very suspicious that if we imagine, this is what's needed in spirituality for it to go, if it comes from a concept, I'm not interested. I'm suspicious. It can't come from the mind. It can't. It's about us bowing down to that which has a deeper wisdom. And then for us to kind of feel that new, I don't know, it's a new model of a mass spiritual awakening. What does that look like? And it's about listening to that and bowing down to it and honoring it and working with it and serving it. That for me makes sense.
That's beautiful. And I think that leaving that kind of an open question is it's a profound place to kind of wrap this up, because it offers people a sort of meditation, all of us. Kind of how can we allow whatever needs to move through us to move through without dictating.
Without dictating or imagining we know better or jumping the gun for some personal agenda that's subtly in there. It's like, it's got to be in the absence of all of that. Let change come. Let growth come. It's about getting out of the way, really, isn't it? A lot of spirituality is about getting out of the way.
Right. So would you like to share anything about what you're teaching or where people can find you, or what's on the horizon for online events or anything like that?
I've started to give quarterly online retreats at home. Next one is in November. Quarterly from there on, I guess, until if the world allows us to have physical retreats again. Let's see if it changes. But for now, quarterly retreats. Every Sunday, there's a pretty neat community that we meet for 90 minutes. We use Zoom chat box for interaction there. Other than that, there's one-to-one work, and there's every now and then I might speak at something and just responding to what goes on. I suppose I'm open to seeing what way this Jac person can serve that which put her here. And so I never do any one thing for a long time. And I'm never teaching any one thing for a long time. So for now, that's what's going on. And it's at jacokeeffe.com,
Yeah, we'll put links to all those things in the description of the video. And I think your openness to serve whatever wants to come through is what comes through when you speak. And I'm so grateful we had this opportunity to talk and connect. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for the chance, Charlie. It's lovely to hang out and talk about this stuff. It's great fun. Thank you.
Thanks.